examples do you have of firebrands overusing the addiction, I think that's the addiction to anger, to the point of sacrificing critical thinking? You would talk about having some examples.
If you quote my blog, it's over. Yes.
I didn't go that far. I could have, but I have so many other good examples already laid out. And it's almost a little too easy to pick on John Loftus.
It's like throwing a rock in the ocean.
Right.
It's so easy.
Since I spent a lot of time reviewing the book The Christian Delusion, Why Faith Fails, I will use some examples of diplomacy failures that I found there. It's also a rather potent example of not listening to the very cognitive science that you're leveling at Christians in the book. And so I actually spent a lot of time just quoting their book back to them, saying this is why you're doing it wrong, because you didn't even read your own book. So the title of the book sets a tone. That Christians are delusional, and at the very least it immediately needs to be clarified in the opening line. I understand the need to generate interest and sell books to get your message out there, but I also understand the need to be responsible with the contents of that message if you actually expect people to listen, and this was not done. Dan Barker in the foreword tells us that skeptics are just so darn interested in truth as though Christians aren't, and in just one paragraph he says that skeptics have a burning desire for the actual facts, the mental hunger, the intense craving to truly fulfill the blanks of knowledge, and they have the searing human drive just to understand. And, you know, well, then there's that, and then there's those that just want to take cheap shots at people they happen to disagree with. John Loftus insults Christians several times before getting around to explaining that he doesn't think that they're literally mentally impaired. We learn from Loftus that, quote, there's no such thing as Christianity, that faith gives believers a psychological malaise. I think that's how you pronounce that word. Human beings are often irrational and gullible, the Bible contains fairy tales, and that Christians are brainwashed. But that the title of the book is not meant to convey that believers have any psychiatric disorders because of their faith. That's good to know. And we don't even get a good definition of delusion until near the end in one of Richard Carrier's chapters, so it's very easy to miss. Loftus also does quite a bit of unnecessary boasting and frames the contents of the book poorly. David Eller in chapter 1, sentence 2, declares victory in all religious arguments without even addressing them. He says, after all, every argument in support of religion has been shown to be inconclusive or demonstrably false. That's sentence 2 in chapter 1, and then he moves on. And you're calling Christians delusional. And then he moves on to do more boasting about winning the culture war, and then misrepresents the position of Christian missionaries in order to oversell the point he does have to make. So that combines a diplomatic, polemical, and logical failure in a very sensitive book that, I mean, if you're calling it the Christian delusion, that's really bad. And so even other contributors like Valerie Tarico in chapter 2, who's probably one of the most well-behaved, modest contributors to the book, and yet, since she's surrounded by firebrands, her chapter is quote mined by embittered Christian reviewers who wish to portray her like her male cohorts. At this point, they just weren't reading what she clearly wrote, and I carefully document this on my blog. Jason Long in chapter 3 overstates numerous points and basically declares that non-religious scholars are completely unbiased, even though I know from other contexts that he definitely knows better. Loftus in chapter 4 lingers too long in telling Christians that if they think they've taken his outsider test for faith and passed it, that they're wrong, and he just declares this. And it looks a great deal like a no true rationalist fallacy, even though he could have merely pointed them to the rest of the arguments in the book. And so he just declares victory on behalf of every thoughtful Christian he's never met. So that's part one of the Christian delusion, which sets the stage for a whole lot of I know you are, but what am I? Retaliation from Christian reviewers who don't really need much red meat to work with in order to shipwreck the conversation and avoid a lot of the impact of the real issues. And I don't know how I'm doing on time, but so just give me 10-minute chunks. So even seemingly the most charitable of Christian reviewers eventually succumb to the 5th grade level of retaliation. And like the proud skeptical authors couldn't see that coming. So we could have all been in the same boat dealing with our culturalization, subjective cognitive gimmicks, biases, and the struggle to apply our standards of evidence consistently on many topics, but most of it was just aimed critically at Christians. And that's basically the reframing job that Richard Carrier did in his presentation at Skepticon 3, which is actually really good. It was a much more straightforward replacement introduction to how to understand the contents of the book. It was just a little late. It should have actually been in the book. And so yeah, I'll stop there with as just one pope example.